Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and I will be walking you through the Wikipedia page Genshin. Just a little background history on Genshin. He was a Tendai Buddhist monk, and he's was very influential for his time, but he's mostly known for maintaining the philosophies and practices of Pure Land Buddhism, as well as deathbed Nembutsu. He had a specific emphasis on the importance of deathbed Nembutsu in Pure Land Buddhism. On the right hand side here, there's a portrait of Genshin, supposedly. However, I don't know how accurate that is because the retrieval link no longer exists, and although the artist was listed, after some research, I couldn't find the connection between the painting and the artist. So this may or may not be Genshin, but it's nice to have a face to the name. If you scroll down, though, they do include a table of contents, so they do break down the Wikipedia page into biography, teachings, deathbed Nembutsu, legacy, references, further reading, and external links, which I think is good on them for including a table of contents because it does help. The organization does help the legibility of their Wikipedia page, so I think this is definitely a plus so far. If you scroll down, though, we'll take a look at their sources, and at the bottom here, they have 7 references and 3 sources cited for further reading. I'll primarily just be looking at the references, though, because those were the texts that they used within their page talking about Genshin. The first source, Nichiren, Writings of Nichiren Shonen Doctrine 2, was published by the University of Hawaii Press. It is cited correctly as it is a book, and they did include an ISBN number. The Writings of Nichiren Shonen, I will say that they're a primary source. However, they are translated, so take that for what you will. But overall, I would say this source does hold a lot of credibility. The second source, by Jacqueline Elise Stone, Original Enlightenment and the Transformation of Medieval Japanese Buddhism. It's also cited correctly in the proper format. It was published by the University of Hawaii Press, and they did include a page number and an ISBN. I did double check, and this book does exist. And as far as background information on Stone, this is Princeton University's Dean of Faculty website, and Jacqueline Stone is a professor of religion there. So I think that we can assume from that this source is credible. The third source, by Garion Kopf, Tao Companion to Japanese Buddhist Philosophy. It's cited correctly. It does include an ISBN number. I did research it as well, and the book does exist. It's a textbook, and Kopf is a professor at Luther College, which is a small private university in Iowa. He's a professor of East Asian religions and philosophy of religion there, and based on that, I would also say that this source is credible. The fourth and the fifth source are actually duplicates. The only difference between the two is that the page numbers are different, but they could have combined the two into one source just by moving the page numbers up into the list of page numbers that they already have. The source is cited correctly. It is a book published by the University of Hawaii Press, and they did include an ISBN. The book does exist, and just a little bit on Robert Rhodes. He was a guest professor at McGill, but he also taught for 28 years at Otani University in Japan, in Kyoto, Japan. He's also done a lot of translating work of Pure Land texts into English, and he's published a lot of scholarly journal articles as well. So he's definitely a professional in his field, so I would also say that that source is credible. The last two sources come from the same place, which is a internet archive. It's called the Wayback Machine, and at first I wasn't sure if that was a credible source. But I did some research, and it's actually backed by the Smithsonian. It's used by professors, and it's was made as a documentation tool of the internet, basically. So anthropologists are very interested in data and the internet and being able to archive those things because we live in such a digital age and it's an important part of human civilization at this time. So it is a scholarly source. However, the first source cited there, number 6, um, it is biographies of many Dharma masters. As you can see, like, they're very brief biographies, so there's not a whole lot of information presented about Genshin. And the second source, or source number 7, that also came from this archive, it's written in Japanese. It's not written in English, so I am not entirely sure whether or not the information presented in this source is accurate or relevant because I do not read or speak Japanese. That is a little beyond me at the moment. As far as the accuracy and relevancy of these sources, I'd first like to note for the first one, by Nichiren, that I'm not sure how relevant this source is because Nichiren was also a Tendai Buddhist monk and philosopher, and Genshin and Nichiren both have similar philosophies. However, I don't know how relevant it is because the subject matter of this Wikipedia page is on Genshin and not Nichiren. That, and they only cite this source once, and it's at the very beginning in the bibliography. I'll scroll up here so you guys can take a look. But right here, it's only listed once. And so this source almost feels kind of unnecessary because A, it's not really about Genshin, it's about somebody else who came later, and B, it's not really used often in this Wikipedia page. The second source, by Stone, it has a lot of information. It's cited often in the Wikipedia page, and there's a lot to glean from it. However, she does a good job of incorporating a lot of different voices in her work. And while, like, that's a great thing, but I don't know if this editor really utilized the fact that there was so much information presented to them in this book. I really think they could have elaborated a lot more with the information that Stone presented. The fourth source, or the third source, excuse me, it's a textbook. It kind of just gives a brief biography of Genshin and Japanese Buddhist philosophy. They do pull a lot from this source as well. So I do think it's relevant. I do think that they made a good use of it. It's not a particularly strong source, just in the fact that it's very it's kind of just your broad. It covers a broad range of Buddhism. It's not very specific to Genshin, to his Ojiyoshu, or Deathbed Nembutsu, but I do think that it is a relevant source. The fourth source and the fifth source, they're also relevant as well. They do cover some specifics about Genshin's Ojiyoshu and the construction of Pure Land discourse. So they do talk about Pure Land Buddhist philosophy. And there are some accuracies there. The biographies of Dharma masters, again, it's considered a scholarly source. I don't think it's very strong, though, because there was such a brief excerpt on his biography in the archive. But again, it's a credible source, and it's still accurate. And number 7, like I said, I do not read Japanese, so I do not know whether or not the accuracy and relevancy is there. Now, to fact check this Wikipedia page, I ended up using 3 sources because one of my sources was actually cited in the further reading. It was Sarah Horton's The Influence of the Ojoyushu in late 10th and early 11th century Japan. Um, so while I kind of overlooked that, I decided to include it, but also bring a third source as well. So all 3 of the sources, my outside sources to fact check, I did pull from JSTOR. The first one was Seeking the Pure Land in Heian, Japan, the practices of the monks of the Nijugo and Zamai. Um, these talked a lot about Genshin, Deathbed Nembutsu, and Ojiushu. It did draw a lot of connections between the two, and so it justified a lot of the material that was presented. Both that Pure Land Buddhism and Deathbed Nembutsu exist, but that Genshin was a big influence in maintaining the practice and passing it along to his disciples. Again, this was the one by Sarah Horton, but it does a lot of the same. The only thing with this one is it does contradict that Genshin was a reclusive monk, which in the Wikipedia page it does list Genshin as such. So this does kind of make the Wikipedia page seem a little less credible, just with that contradiction and that notion that she challenges. And the last source, The Essentials of Salvation, a study of Genshin's Ojoyushu. This just talks a lot about Genshin's Ojiushu, but it does give a brief biography as well. So, with that said, it was an opportunity for me to fact check some of the dates that were listed in the Wikipedia page. All of these sources were used to verify a specific claim. Right here, that states, in addition to general practices related to the Pure Land, Genshin emphasized the practice of deathbed nembutsu, that is to say, the practices performed on one's deathbed. Genshin felt that the nembutsu practices performed near the hour of death were particularly important, as one's final thoughts before death had a disproportionate importance in determining one's rebirth. And all of these sources really dived into that belief in Pure Land Buddhism and justified this claim. Lastly, there weren't a whole lot of biases in this Wikipedia page. It seemed to be written very academically, although I will note that I don't feel like the Wikipedia page was very complete, as it would have been nice if they would have had more variety of sources, and stronger sources too. I don't think they really maximized the sources that they found in the Wikipedia page, because they really could have expanded on some of these topics, as well as I think that having a variety of sources with lots of different voices would have also made this Wikipedia page stronger. But anyway, that is that on the Wikipedia page Genshin, and thank you.